All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just gonna wait for a couple more minutes just to see if any stragglers join here. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you all for showing up. And yeah, this is going to be a touch designer workshop. Yeah, so let's go ahead and just hang out for a few more minutes here. Cool. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Sal, and I work a lot in TouchDesigner, obviously. I am based in Chicago, so if anyone else is in Chicago, it's actually looking up this winter looks like it is hopefully on the way out, and spring is on the cusp. It's definitely warming up compared to the last couple of weeks here. It's been pretty gnarly. I would say the last few weeks, it's been pretty gnarly. So yeah, and if you are wherever you are based out of, feel free to drop that in the chat. Would love to know where you all are from, where you all are popping in from as well. Cool. So we're gonna hopefully try to keep this within the hour. I did plan for it to be about an hour, but you know, as I was making the workshop, I was also planning out like what things I would be describing and explaining. So hopefully we can fit it all within the short time frame here. But of course, no worries if you go over. There really is no rush for doing this thing. And yeah, as you can see from the image here, we're going to be building a pretty simple, basic audio reactive visual. And the idea here is to just get started with doing something, and also, yeah, make something cool, make something that is not just like a circle moving around or a circle like expanding based on music. But to really bring in a lot of different ideas and bring in a lot of different concepts, and yeah, make something cool with that. I will also assume that maybe some of us have not even downloaded TouchDesigner, which is completely okay. So what I did want to do first here was just to show where you can download this software, and then we'll move forward from there. So let's go ahead and get over to TouchDesigner's website. And here it is. You don't see me anymore, but I promise I'm still here. So this is the derivative website. This is where you can download TouchDesigner. It is pretty, I think, a pretty mid-sized software. It's pretty easy to go ahead and just click on this available for download here link right here on the welcome page. And then that will take you to the place where you can download it. It should also specify which system you're on, right? So if you're on Windows, here's a nice easy button to click. If you're on Mac, here's another easy button. For Mac, I'm not on a Mac, I'm on a Windows, so I'm not quite sure if when downloading TouchDesigner here, it will specify whether you need to download it for whatever processor you have. And it does, right? So you have the Silicon, which is the newer, the M chips, and then we have the older version, the Intels here. So if you don't know which architecture your Mac is on, I think you can click this link here. You should also be able to go into your Mac system information, and it should specify whether you're on an M chip or whether you're on an Intel chip there. So yeah, let's go ahead and I want to give you a preview of what we're going to be building today within TouchDesigner. So let's go ahead and transition over to my TouchDesigner application. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. You should actually not be able to hear the audio just yet. Let me go ahead and turn that on. Cool. Great. So if you've worked in TouchDesigner before, then you are probably really familiar with the audio track that's playing in the background here. This is the default go-to audio music track that you can play when you're adding the audio component for the first time here. So yeah, we have a few things that we're going to be going over. There's two main sections here for this workshop. First is building out the visuals, what we see, and then the second is actually getting the audio reactive component to work. And yeah, this is it. So a few different moving parts here. We're going to be breaking it down step by step, taking it slow. I do want to just do a brief overview of the interface before we dive into actually coding and programming this thing. Again, for those of us who are not too familiar with TouchDesigner, I do want to give a very brief overview. There are a ton of tutorials out there that cover the basics and interfaces. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and do that while we are getting started. Hopefully the audio levels are okay. Maybe turn that down a little bit. I'm actually going to go ahead and just turn this off. The audio, at least. Turn all this stuff off. You don't need that anymore. Cool. So when you open TouchDesigner for the first time, you might see a default network here. This is a little getting started network that you can play around with. The first thing that I tend to do is just delete all of it. So what you can do is just click and drag your cursor, right click and drag your cursor, and you can select all of those different boxes, all those different nodes, and then just hit the delete key and those will all disappear. Now, I'm just going to cover a few aspects, a few things that I feel are the most important, especially when we're just diving into this thing. And the first is this main editor that we have here. So it looks like a grid. It looks like a graph almost. And this is where we're going to be writing our program, writing our quote unquote code. Now, with TouchDesigner, we actually aren't writing out lines of code, but instead we are adding operators or adding nodes into this system here. And that is really what makes TouchDesigner pretty unique, is that it is a graphic-based, node-based programming software. So it's very visual. So if you're a visual kind of person, it's very useful. And I feel like it's really easy to just like jump into and just start playing around and experimenting with different things. As opposed to maybe code where you are forced to, well, not forced, but you have to like write out lines of code, and there's a lot smaller margin for error when it comes to typing out a typo or misspelling something. With TouchDesigner, it's really just you pick what you want, you add it here, and then you can really just edit it from there. So first thing I do want to talk to you about is the next interface element we see at the very bottom, which is the timeline. So the only really thing that I'm really concerned about with the timeline is just checking out the FPS, or the frames per second that we have here. And by default, we're targeting for 60 frame per second playback. We can also see the frames per second up here at the top. Right here in this little box, it says FPS as well. And this is a real-time monitor of that frame per second. So you might have seen it kind of just like wiggle to 59 for a second and then went back up to 60. So you'll find that the more things that we add into the network, the more computing that our program is going to have to do. And therefore the FPS may suffer a little bit. But really when we're programming, the goal is to keep this at 60 frames per second as much as possible. And there may be times when it does drop to 40 or 50, and that's okay. I think once you start going below 30 FPS, that's when things start to become really noticeable. Okay, the next thing that we have that I want to point out up towards the top is just saving in general. You can go up here to the File menu and you can click on Save. And if you open this project for the first time, you'll be able to name your project file and also choose where to save it to. I recommend doing this just to start off, just so you're not working out of the downloads folder, because things tend to get lost in there or even disappear. I've had that happen before as well. Cool. The next thing I think is open by default is this side panel here, which is the palette. We'll be talking about this palette again later, but we can click to toggle. We can toggle this on and off by clicking on this palette button, just like that. So I'm going to turn that off for now, just to have a lot more space to work with here in the main editor. Cool. And if you're watching, I know it's kind of difficult, especially with the YouTube Live format. There is definitely a delay when I see like any questions that appear. So you are welcome to follow along. You are also welcome to just like kind of watch and absorb it and ask questions as we're going. This will be available after the live is finished so that you can go back, you can watch it again, and maybe when you have more time, also the opportunity to pause. That would be something that would be maybe useful to you if you go ahead and decide to follow along with this. But if you're just enjoying the show, that's great. That just gives more opportunity for you to ask questions, um, ask why certain things are happening, and yeah, and ask about any other possibilities that we could do with what we're trying to build here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing some things here. So we need to start adding stuff, right? It's a blank project. There's nothing happening yet. So our favorite key is going to be the tab key. So when you type out tab on your keyboard, you're going to open up this operator create dialog. And this is the op create dialog for short. Now in this is where we have all of what we call operators. And operators are the building blocks of TouchDesigner. We have different types of operators that do different things, that deal with different types of data. So the first thing you'll notice here is this color-coded tab menu up here at the top. And this is what we call the different operator families. Now, there are quite a few here. For this workshop, we're only going to be covering 2 operator families. This is the first one here, which is the top tab. And top stands for texture operators. And when we think about texture operators, we're really dealing with everything that is 2D pixel based. So 2-dimensional pixels, drawing shapes, imagery, manipulating shapes, color, all that cool stuff that we are probably familiar with. You'll notice here within this menu that there are different shades of this indigo color. We have the lighter shade, and then we have these darker shades. So an important thing to note about TouchDesigner is that we first have to create data in order to change it and in order to experiment with it. These darker colored options are what we call generators. They generate data for us to be able to use. So one pretty popular one is the circle top. And if you hover over these at the very bottom, at the bottom of this pop-up window, you'll see a very brief description of what this does. So if you hover over circle, it's going to say that the circle top can be used to generate circles, ellipses, and n-sided polygons. And that's just saying and any number of polygons that we want. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to add here, is I'm going to add my circle top. When you click to select that, you can see that this is sort of following my cursor before I place it where I want to put it. So I'm just going to click it right in the middle. And here we have a circle top. So we're going to go ahead and do that one more time. I'm going to hit tab again. I'm going to go, this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So instead of searching visually for that circle, and as you can see, sometimes it may take a little while because there are so many different operators here. What I can alternatively do is start typing out circle. And you'll see everything becomes grayed out except for the operator that you are looking for. So I see that circle is the only one that's left alone. And I can go ahead and hit enter to select that second circle. No problem. Pi X later. Glad you're here. Welcome. Cool. So now we have 2 circles. And now we can start doing some really cool stuff with only these 2 circles. So notice that when I click to select these operators, they become highlighted. So I'm going to click on this one called Circle 1, and you can see they do get named by default. And I can type out the letter P on my keyboard to open up what we call the parameter window. So again, that's typing out P for parameters. And I'm going to go ahead and just move this over just so they're a little bit closer together. So this is where the true power of how we can customize these comes into play. Parameter windows are really important because as you can see, they offer a lot of different settings that we can use to customize the operator. You'll also notice here that there are different tabs as well. We're going to be focusing on this first one in most of the operators that we add, which is, in this case, it's called circle. Now, again, there are quite a few ways that we customize this. I'm going to be focusing on a few ways here. So the first thing is the radius, and we can think of this as the size of the operator. So what I can do is I can go ahead and click my cursor. I can customize this by just typing out a different value. And notice how the values are in decimals. So we're going to keep this relatively small. So anything below 1. So if I were to make this 1, you'll see that stretches out the width of the circle here, and it actually becomes an ellipse. So this first value is the width. The second value is the height. So if I do 1 by 1, you can see it's already overtaking the area that is designated for this shape to be drawn in. So I want to keep this relatively small. I'm going to actually keep it as a default 0.4 by 0.4. So I can just go in here, edit these values. I was doing a quick shortcut where I hit tab to go to the next option there. And yeah, we'll keep it there for now. The next operator the next parameter that I want to edit here is the polygon. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle the polygon on, and you can see when I toggle that on, it's going to change the shape entirely. And this is where we get into that end polygon type of shape. So when I toggle polygon on, it actually makes available the next set of parameters, which is the most important, is these sides. So I can use this slider here to change the number of sides that the circle or not circle, but that this polygon now has. And I'm going to keep it here at 5 because I like 5. We can also experiment with the softness. You can see that kind of softens the edges, almost makes it a little bit blurry. And that's really the beauty of TouchDesigner, in my opinion, is that you can really just kind of like play with these values and see what happens. And if you don't like it, you can always just put it back, right? So we have border width here. And so now we can see we can actually create like a border there. We can change colors here. I'm going to leave all this alone because we're going to be doing a lot with colors later on in this little chain that we have going on. Cool, so that's the first circle. Let's go ahead and edit the second circle now. So I'm going to click to select that circle number 2. And for circle 2, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing when I'm turning the polygon on. I'm going to leave the sides at 3. So we have our 2 main shapes here. And just to give you some context into like the first thing that we're building, I'm going to go ahead and pop over here just to show you. The first thing that we want to build is this little chain here. Right, so I want to be able to make this polygon have this circular radiance inside of it. And then I also want to just create a background for that to be on top of. So this is our first goal here, is just building out this little section. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. The next thing that I want to add here are, if I open up my create dialog by typing out tab again, I want to go ahead and add a transform top. And actually, I'm going to go back. If we hover over transform, we get a little description. The transform top applies 2D transformations to a top image like translate, scale, rotate, and tiling. So that is going to be important when we want to start to manipulate this shape, moving it, rotating it, scaling it, whatever we choose to do. So I'm going to go ahead, once I add that, you'll notice here that I have this big red X at the corner. That is because this is expecting an input. So this is where I think TouchDesigner becomes really fun, is connecting things together. You'll notice here on either side of these operators, there are these little slots. And this is where we can either connect things into or send things out of. So this is the input on the left. This is the output on the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect my circle top to my transform top. Because the transform, as we saw, it needs to have a source. It needs to have data in order for it to work. because it cannot generate it, it manipulates it. So I'm going to go ahead and connect. To connect these, I'm going to hover my mouse over the right side of my circle, click and drag. You see this little wire or this little noodle comes out of it. I'm just going to go ahead and hover that over the input of transform and then release my mouse. And now I've successfully connected these two operators. Cool. And yeah, let's go ahead and do that one more time. I'm going to show you a little quick shortcut though. Since I want to make another transform, what I can do is simply click on it and I can use my keyboard shortcuts, Control C and Control V, or Command C and Command V if you're on Mac. And that just makes a copy of that transform. Notice though that when I do that, it also brings along that connection from circle 1. So I don't want this to be there. So in order to delete a connection, what I need to do is hover over it so it becomes highlighted. I right click and then I can disconnect that. And then from there, I can go ahead and connect my circle 2 to my transform 2. So we have two separate unique transforms, so we can uniquely manipulate and adjust the transform properties for these two circles, right? So we want to do this independently. Cool, so hopefully we're getting the hang of adding operators, connecting them together, and yeah, we're well on our way to building this network. So the next operator that I want to add here is the switch. So I'm going to open up that op create dialog by hitting tab, search for switch. I can see switch is highlighted over here, and it says the switch top is a multi-input operator, which lets you switch which input is passed through using the input parameter. So I'm going to add that. I will notice a pretty big distinction with the switch top, and that is the input is actually much larger than these individual ones we see here in the previous operators. If I hover over that, it actually tells me why. And it says this is a multi-input operator. And this means that I could connect more than one operator into this switch. Because I'm just going to show you real quick, if I were to try and connect my circle 2 into my transform 1, that actually just replaces a connection. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind as you're building out, is that these multi-inputs are pretty useful when you're trying to connect multiple operators together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect my transform 1 into switch and then my transform 2 also into switch. And you'll see now they're both connected to this same operator. Now we're adding a switch top is because we want to be able to go back and forth between these two base shapes. So what I can do is if I open up the parameters for my switch by typing out the letter P, I can use this index parameter, use a slider, and you can see once that surpasses 1, that goes to the second operator that is connected here. So 0 is the first operator, which is my pentagon, and then 1 is the second, which is the triangle. We can also toggle this blend between inputs on, and that offers us a pretty cool little fade in, or fading in between these two operators. I'm going to keep that off for now. Cool. So now let's talk about how we can get that. Actually, you know what? Give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and I want to be able to show you what we're building as we're building it. So I'm going to go ahead and make it. I'll show you how to do this as well. I want to make it so it's right here, just so we have that reference into what it is that we're building. Okay. So we have the pentagon shape. As you can see, we're pretty close. Now what I want to do is actually build this circular pattern that I see here. So below my switch, I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to add a ramp operator. And the ramp top allows you to interactively create vertical, horizontal, radial, and circular ramps. Another way I like to think of the ramp is the gradient top, because we can use a ramp to create gradients. Now let's go ahead and dive deeper into the ramp top, open up those parameters and see what's going on here. So for these parameters, the first thing we see is this color bar. And this is where we can either add or remove these little markers that you see. And by default, there are 2 markers on either side. You can see there's one that is white, that means it's selected, and there's one that is black. So if I click on these markers, you see they become highlighted, and I can edit them. We can also add markers by clicking anywhere on this bar, and you see another marker gets added. And if I don't want that marker to be there anymore, all I have to do is click and drag it away from the color bar, and that gets removed. So I want to keep it pretty straightforward and just kind of leave it as these 2 default markers here. I'm going to click on this first one on the left, and I'm going to go ahead and just customize the color. Now I'm not going to worry too much about matching this exactly. This is where I'm really just going to kind of experiment. So these next, we'll focus on the next 4 parameters here: hue, saturation, value, and alpha, or HSVA. This determines what the color is. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to turn up the value all the way up. And then from there, I can start to adjust the hue and then turn up that saturation. And you can see it's really nice also because we can see those changes in real time within our operator. And this is really where you can customize this to your liking. Again, there's no wrong answer when it comes to what color you want. I'm going to go ahead and click on the second marker here at the end, so that becomes highlighted, and I'm going to go ahead and edit this once again. And again, we're going to have to turn the value set to 1, perfect, so we'll have to turn up the saturation to really see that color. So got a nice little California sunset going on here. And cool, you're also welcome to add more markers if you'd like to get some more variation in your gradients. I'm going to leave it at 2 though. Cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and change the type, because by default, this is a gradient that moves from left to right. And as you can see here, this gradient is actually a circle. So with this type, you may guess which one we need already, which is the circular operator. And that makes it so that the gradient actually radiates outwards. So it starts from the center and it radiates out to the edges of the circle. Now you'll also notice here in what we're trying to achieve that it looks like it's repeating more often. Mine that I have currently is just like kind of one circle that's taken up the viewer. But here we have multiple. So what I'm going to do is I'm next going to go ahead and adjust the period parameter. And if you were to bring this up, you'll see period essentially is like a scale factor, right? So if I were to turn this all the way up, you'll see I'm scaling that initial circle up. If I were to turn that down below 1, it starts to shrink and also repeat. Cool, almost looks like the Looney Tunes welcome, like their title screen. And then I do have a set value for this, which is 0.19. But again, you're welcome to choose whichever value best suits your needs here. Cool, and that is our ramp. Coming along very nicely here. So we are almost done. We have a few more operators to add here for this section. The next one is now I want to combine these two, because as you can see, the gradient is actually inside of my pentagon. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up my op create dialog again. I'm going to add a multiply top. And multiply performs a multiply operation on input 1 and input 2. So let's go ahead and add that over here. And the special thing about multiply is that there are 2 unique inputs here. So it does matter which order that you connect these into. So the pentagon is going to be the first input. That's my base shape. The second is going to be the ramp. And there we go, right? So this is multiplying the colors of both of these operators together. So the way that this works is that you'll see that the pentagon, the background is this checkered background, which means that is completely, it's the alpha channel, which if you think about this in terms of pixel value is actually 0. So that's kind of how we're getting this effect here, because all of the outside region of this pentagon is 0. And so when I'm multiplying this by this ramp, all that same region is going to be 0 as well, because anything times 0 is 0. And what we're left with here, because we have this, the actual color of the shape is white. And so this is also essentially the value of 1. So anything times 1 is going to be itself. So the ramp here times 1 or times the white is going to be just the ramp. If I were to change the color of this circle here, then the way that this is multiplied would also change. Cool. And if I were to also change the order, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to demonstrate to you. I'm going to disconnect these, right click, disconnect. In this case, I do get a similar result here. But depending on what it is you're multiplying, you may want the order to change somewhat. Okay, the last thing which we don't see here, which we'll get to, but we want to add just a simple background. So I'm going to go ahead and add, below my multiply, I'm going to add a rectangle top once again. And in this case, I wanted to make it a backdrop or a background. So for the rectangle, I'm going to open up the parameters, and then I'm going to increase the size. So again, the way this works is if you put a value of 1, it's going to take up the entire space here. So I want to make this 1 by 1. And you'll see now I have a completely white background here. But I don't want it to be white. I want it to change the color. So I'm going to click on the fill color parameter. If I click on the color box, I get this neat little color picker. And with this color picker, I can go ahead and choose whatever color that I want. I'm going to choose this light blue here. You can also, if you don't like these preset colors, you can go ahead and customize it either using this HSV or this RGB. So notice the RGB, typically when we think about RGB values, they go from 0 to 255. In this case, with TouchDesigner, it's actually from 0 to 1. But we also have these little sliders that we can use to really customize that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and customize it and close it out. And that is step number 1. So we built our base shape here. Yeah, this is cool. Again, if you have any questions about anything that's happening here, please let me know. You can drop those in the chat. I'd be happy to answer those. Cool, so we have our base shape and things are coming along. We're not yet going to go ahead and combine these together because there is another thing I want to add that's going to also expose us to some different ideas and some different concepts within TouchDesigner. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and now I want to preview. Let's see. Guess I got to turn all these on. Okay. I want to preview this part. I'm actually going to go ahead and just stop that animation for now. So this is the next thing that we want to build here, and it's simply just the outline of the shape. And so when we think about this, right now it's pretty like it's planned out, so I kind of know where things are going and how things are happening and coming together. But most likely you'll be in a place where you're just thinking through this as you're building. So what I'm thinking here is I want this outline to be a little bit larger and just kind of go around this pentagon shape, kind of like just like an outline or a border for it. And I don't want it to, I just want it to kind of be this, right? I don't want it to be like a square because that will take up a lot of space and area. And I also want to give it some pretty, like a fun little pattern. I don't want it to be a solid color. I want it to be little bit variation in the color as it goes around here. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and think through what I need to add first. And this is going to be a completely new network. I'm going to be working here at the bottom of my editor here. So the first thing I'm going to need is actually a rectangle. So let's go ahead and add a rectangle here to the mix. And for this rectangle, we're going to go ahead and I don't think we're going to edit this. Let's open up the parameters and let's take a look. So the size, I'm going to keep that the same, 0.5 by 0.5. Yeah, we won't touch this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a way to actually create an outline of this rectangle. And let's do this another way. So we've been hitting tab, searching, and then physically connecting these nodes together. Instead of what I want to do is I'm going to use a little shortcut. So on the right side of the output of my rectangle, I'm going to right click on that. And that immediately pops up my create dialog. I'm going to search for an edge top. And the edge top finds edges in an image and highlights them. So when I click on that, you'll see, oh, now I get an auto connection, right? So now I saved myself a step by right-clicking on the output. When I drop this, it automatically connects to the input of that new operator that we add. So really useful, really easy way, a quick way to add operators and get them connected. Nice little shortcuts here and there that we can definitely pick up on and continue to add. So as we can see here, it detected the edges of that input. And so now I have essentially the outline of the rectangle, or in this case, of the square. If I open up the parameters for that edge, the most important one here is the strength. If I bump that strength up, and this is really noticeable and useful, especially when you have more complex images, the strength will give you that opportunity to fine-tune the edges or fine-tune the way that it's being detected. So if you want like less edges, you can definitely put that down. It's not really noticeable here just because it's a square. It's a pretty simple shape. So I'm going to leave that at number 1. We can also change the edge color, but we don't need to because we're going to be doing something else pretty cool with this. Cool. So after the edge, I'm going to use my right-click shortcut again. So I'm going to right-click on the output. I'm going to search for a transform, and I'm going to add that. And now we're actually going to go ahead and edit some of these property parameters here in the transform. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to increase the scale. I want to increase the size of this so that it is going a little bit closer to the edges of the viewer. So for the scale value, I'm actually going to make this 1.7. That's for the X. And then for the Y, it's also going to be 1.7. Perfect. And that's pretty much it for the transform. And yeah, so now we have our outline. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to create this really cool color effect here. And if we think back to our previous step, right, we're in a kind of a similar predicament here, where I had this completely white shape that I wanted to embed this gradient into. And to do that, I used the multiply top. And that's going to be the same thing we do here, right? So I'm going to do the same steps. Below my transform, I'm once again going to add a ramp. And this is not going to be connected because we're going to be multiplying these together. And so for this ramp, I'm going to go ahead and customize this once again. I'm going to go ahead and just customize the first value here. So let me turn up the value parameter, turn up the saturation. And again, you can make this whatever you want. I'm going to make this more into like the pink area there. And again, I'm also going to keep it at 2 markers. You're welcome to customize this however you like as well. For the type, I'm actually going to change this as well because we can see this pattern here it looks like it has like different corners or different like places where it begins. So for the type, I'm going to change this to radial. And radial is a pretty special type of gradient because it starts here on the right and then it works its way around, like up, and this is counterclockwise, right? So it starts here, it goes counterclockwise around, and then restarts there. So now the only thing I want to do is I want to be able to make this line in 4 different places, almost like creating a little, like a little grid, like with 2 lines, one horizontal and then one vertical. So this is made possible with the period. So I'm going to go ahead and change this period. And if you don't know what it does, all I'd recommend is just play with the slider and see what happens, right? So if you turn this up, it kind of just like fades into each other, right? It kind of just fades into like a pretty one color. If I make this below 1, now I get some really interesting things start to happen. And so the value that's going to work for me is 0.25. And you can change this if you want to as well. 0.33 is a cool one too, because it makes it 3, almost like a little propeller. But I'm going to keep this at 0.25, just so I have that like square grid kind of effect there. Cool, and so we're almost done. The last thing I want to do, similar to the step above, is I want to go ahead and multiply these together. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on transform. I'm going to search for my multiply, and I'm going to add multiply top here. And let's go ahead and multiply the ramp to that shape. And would you look at that? Now we have this really cool customized outline. And that is step number 2 complete. So we have our 2 main visual components pretty much done. The last thing we're going to be doing here is bringing it all together. So before I do that, we can actually like move things around and rearrange these if you want to. So I'm actually going to go ahead and move this bottom part just a little bit lower. So I'm going to right click and drag to select all those operators. And I'm going to go ahead and just click on any one of them and then drag them down, just so there's a little bit more space in between these 2 different sections. Cool, so now we are in the final phase of the visual component here, where I'm going to go ahead and bring it all together. So let me go ahead and mute that. And okay, let me also just kind of stop these from doing anything if I can. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. I do want to kind of backtrack and show you how we can get this preview up here as we work. So to do this, what we're going to do, let's pretend this is off. Okay, so this is probably where we're at right now. So what we want to first do is split the screen. So at the top right, you'll see this downward pointing arrow. And if I click on that drop-down menu, there is an option that says split left right. So I can click on that. Now I have 2 different views, 2 different halves of this network. Now for the right side, what I want to do is there is this upside down triangle that is pane type. So if I click on that, I'm going to go ahead and select the top viewer option. And right now it's blank. But what I can do is with each operator, there are these little buttons on the sides and on the bottom, and these are called flags. So there are different purposes for these flags. We're going to cover a couple, but the first one I want to talk about is this little blue dot here, and it is by default turned off. So if I click on this display flag, you'll see it appears on the right. It also appears in the background, which I find just a little bit distracting. So I'm going to get rid of the background here. Let me turn that off first so that it's not as confusing here. I'm going to right click in an empty space. I'm going to go to the display menu, and I'm going to uncheck this backdrop tops checkbox. So now when I turn that display flag back on, you'll see it no longer appears in the background, but I can still see it over here on the right. And I like this. I do like this setup just because, again, it's less distracting. So as you're working, you don't have like the visuals kind of just like overpowering your view. And also, it's just, I think it's cleaner just to have the preview over here on the right, just so it's separate from the work that you're doing. And I can also resize this. If I hover over the middle where it's split, I can click and drag that. I can make that smaller just so it's over here to the side, right above my webcam there. I can toggle these on. I can turn on different ones to show different previews. You notice how they're all separate. So the goal now is to just bring these three components together, because we have the main shape right here, we have the background, and then we have the outline or the border. So let's go ahead and add a new operator to bring this all together. I'm going to hit Tab. I'm going to search for the composite operator. And the composite is a pretty special operator. It is a multi-input top that will perform a composite operation for each input. So let's go ahead and add the composite there. And you may notice this input here. Again, it's larger, which means it is a multi-input, which means I can add more than one operator here. So let's go ahead and connect all of these three, the multiply, the rectangle, and the other multiply here. So let's go ahead and connect that into comp, connect my rectangle into comp, and then multiply into comp. Well, looks like it all disappeared, right? So this definitely didn't work the way that I wanted it to. But let's go ahead and open up the parameters and let's see what happened. So if I look at the parameters for the operation parameter, this is set to multiply. Now we know what multiply does because we've used multiply already. This multiplies all the values together. So what's happening here is that the majority of my viewers here are alpha channels. So essentially, I'm just zeroing out my entire network. So what I can do to fix this is I actually want to make this layered, right? I want to be able to set these on top of each other so that they're stacked and that I have the complete composition. So for operation, I'm going to go ahead and click on that drop-down menu, and there are a ton of options. The one that we want is called over. So it's going to be on the right column. It's also alphabetized. So over, click on that, and now I get some more interesting things that I can see. And the way that over works is essentially now we're working with layers. So we have a top layer, a middle layer, and then a bottom layer. So right now what's happening is I can also see the layer order under the connected input ops section. So I have multiply 1, rectangle 1, and then multiply 2. And that's not what I want, right? Because I can't even see the multiply 2 because it is on the bottom layer. So I can use this interface here to move these layers around. So I can use this arrow button to move my multiply 2 up to 1 layer. And there we go. Now I have my complete visual composition. That is the power of the composites operator. If we only had 2 operators that we wanted to layer on top of each other, then there is a really neat operator called over. The only thing about over, though, is that there's only, similar to multiply, there's only 2 operators here, or 2 inputs here. So I can only connect 2 operators, which is not fun, unless, that's all you need is 2. But for us, we needed more than 2. So that's when the composite top comes in handy. Cool, we're almost done. 2 more things I want to do here. The first thing is I want to be able to add the ability to change the color of the entire composition. So to do that, what I'm going to do after comp is I'm going to add an HSV adjust top. HSV adjust. And just to kind of show you what we're going to be doing here, if I look at the parameters, The important parameter for today is the hue offset. If I were to just drag the slider, you can see it changes the overall hue of that visual. So it's going to be useful, especially when we want to make the visuals or the color audio reactive. And the last thing we're going to add here is a null top. And the null top is it doesn't do anything, right? There's no operation part of the null operator. It's important because it marks the end of this section of our network. We use nulls to separate networks, or almost if you're familiar with programming, you would end your statement with a semicolon. I like to think of that in the same way, except it won't throw an error if you miss it, but it is good practice to end these with a null, just so that you're like, okay, this is it, this is done. And then what you can also do is toggle that on, the display flag on for this null, and that will that will signify the end of that network. Cool. There goes the visuals. Again, if there's any questions y'all have about what's happening, what this is, like what is the software, feel free to drop that in the chat. As we're thinking about questions, I do want to talk about resolution at this point because we're done with the visuals. You'll notice that this is a pretty grainy image, right? It's by no means the best quality. If I look at this in a larger view, definitely grainy, definitely pixelated, and not really ideal at all. And that is because of resolution. So when we add these operators, there is a default resolution that we work with, and that is not the best quality. And at the beginning of this workshop, I talked about the differences between the generator operators and then the ones that just manipulate the data. So again, all the darker shaded options here are generator operators, which means they are in charge of creating the data. So this falls into resolution. So if I were to actually click on, let's say this circle one here, open up the parameter, and click on the common tab, you'll see that I have a resolution parameter. And by default, this is 256 by 256 pixels. And the standard that we work with, we may be familiar with like 1920 by 1080, 4K, 8K, that all have to do with resolution. So this is a pretty small resolution here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and bump up the resolutions for all of the generator tops that I've added here. And it's going to be important that I select all of the generator operators. Oh, it's okay, pixelator. I get it now. I didn't catch that the first time. All right, pixelator. HSV adjust is game changing. I've been using RGB keys and ramps to change all my colors. Yeah, I really like the HSV adjust. I think it's just really easy, and it shifts all the colors. If you imagine like a grid, it's just shifting all the colors along there. Especially that hue offset, that is super useful. Yeah, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and click to select all of the generator operators. So if I hold down Control and start clicking, I can select all of these individual. So I'm gonna select my circle 1, my circle 2, my rectangle 2, my rectangle 1, my ramp 1, my ramp 2. And you might get the idea. This is probably easier as you go. But I did want to wait until the end to talk about this just so there's less things to like kind of throw at you. So I have all these selected. I'm going to open up my parameter window. And it doesn't matter which parameter you're looking at here because the common is the parameters that all of these tops have in common with each other. So if I change the resolution, what I can do is there's this triangle at the end, and it gives me some preset options, right? And if you're like me, and I'm using just kind of the free license to TouchDesigner, then we're going to be limited in how much resolution or how large of a resolution we can apply here. So I'm going to go ahead and I already know that 1280 is the max for the free license. So I'm going to go ahead and just manually type in here for the resolution 1280 by 1280. And you can see that becomes way better, a lot more refined. It also makes the edge a little bit like thinner, which is okay. We can still see it, and it's still pretty visible, and I kind of like it that way as well. Yeah, so that is resolution. Again, it's easier as you go if you have like a set resolution to adjust these, instead of like at the very end trying to find all of them. Because if you miss only one, like let's say for this ramp, let's say I missed it and I left it as the default 256, you'll see that it doesn't actually catch that, right? So if I increase this, the ramp, it's still very blurry. So yeah, that's kind of where it's important just to make those changes and then kind of leave it there. If you did maybe try to use like a 1920 by 1920, it's still going to work. You'll get this little warning message though, and it's going to tell you that it's limited to 1280 by 1280. It still works, like it's just a warning, but yeah, just to let you know about that, especially if you bring in images that are higher resolution, it's definitely going to limit those to the 1280 format. Okay, cool. So that is everything to do with the visuals for our network. A couple of things to think about when it comes to optimization, especially maybe if you're working like on a laptop and it maybe TouchDesigner, the more that we add to it, the more our laptops tend to get really hot. So thinking about optimization, one thing that I like to do when I'm done is select all the operators here. So I can do that by either clicking and dragging, or I can use Control A or Command A to select all. And then revisiting these little buttons here, which we call flags, I can click on the viewer, and this is the top left little radial button there. And that's going to go ahead and just turn off the viewers. It's going to hide them. I'm not deactivating my network at all. You can still see the output here, but I'm just kind of saving a little bit of resources, because for each thing that we see, our computer has to do work to render those and to show and display those. So yeah, if you want it, you can also just kind of keep this last one visible as well, just so you have that idea. But this is a pretty good practice that I like to do a lot, just hiding the viewers, just so that my computer is not chugging along here. And also keeping an eye up here. There should be no reason for the FPS to drop, but just checking, see, okay, that is still 60 FPS. Beautiful. Thanks, Go Ground Shell. Appreciate that. Okay, let's take a little water break before we dive into the exciting stuff of audio. Definitely over an hour, but that's okay, because again, there's no time limit, except for when my voice runs out, I guess. Which is why I have tea. Here we go. Lukewarm, perfect. No problem, Go Ground Shell. Glad you're enjoying it. You as well, Pixelator. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into some animations now. So we're done with this. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of scroll down here and focus. I'm gonna zoom in just so I'm like hyper focused here on getting this thing to move. Thank you, Nora. And you can ignore this. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn this stuff back on, except for the audio. I'm gonna keep that muted. Because I do wanna show you that we're almost there. We are very close to having this, this thing done. There's one more thing I need to turn on as well, which is perfect. Okay. Cool, so this is our end result, this is our goal. We're getting here, we're very close, right? We have the visuals, so the last thing we need here is just to get things moving. So let's talk about the second family of operators. Up until this point, we've been working with tops, just solely tops. Well, the way that we're going to get this thing to animate is by looking at a different operator family, which is the chop tab. So I'm going to click on that chop tab, and I'll see now I have a plethora of selections that are green. So chop stands for channel operator, and a really easy way to think about chops is anything to do with data and values. When we deal with chops, we are mainly dealing with operators that can create, manipulate, and also process data, and more specifically, process channels of data. When we think about chops, these are mainly time-based, so data that moves and changes over time, which is a big difference from the tops because these are static, right? Images, they don't move, they're rendered, and they kind of just stay there. With chops, since we're dealing with time-based data, we can get things to move and change over time. So to start off, before we dive into audio, I just want to introduce you to a commonly used chop called the LFO chop. And if you just type in LFO, it'll pop up here. I'm going to hover over that. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, generates waves in real time in 2 ways. So let's go ahead and click on LFO. I'm going to add this below my ramp number 2. And this is where I'm doing the cross thing. And you can see we get a much different viewer here. This looks really different than what we've been working with, because this is really just giving us the value, a table of the value, and it changing over time. So I'm going to go ahead and just pause my timeline here. So I hit my space bar. This is also a really common error that you may encounter. Let's say you're working, you accidentally hit the space bar and your entire network freezes. You may think like, oh no, my computer crashed, like it's done, there goes all my work, all my data is lost. Well, you might have just typed out the space bar. And the way that you know is if you look at the bottom part of the timeline here, these numbers have stopped moving and stopped changing. And also the pause button is highlighted. So that happens sometimes. You're like, oh no. But if you just hit spacebar again, you can resume that, or you can just go ahead and click on the play button again. And that will also play back. A really kind of interesting sidebar. I saw a video recently of like someone explaining why these symbols are the way they are, like why the play button is the way it is, pause and stop. Really quickly, apparently the play button was meant to symbolize or represent like the direction of tape, of the direction that tape would move. Because old school, you have tape, like reels of tape of footage. You put that in, and it will like cycle it from left to right. And so that's kind of like it's pointing in the direction that the tape should be moving from left to right. And then like the pause button is like an interruption of like the tape playing, right? So you're like pausing it, you're putting a little break in between so it doesn't play anymore. So yeah, I don't know, I found that pretty interesting. I don't think I might have like learned that a long time ago, but it was like a nice, cool thing to learn about. Anyways, back to the grind here. So LFO, the reason why I paused it was because I wanted to kind of just show you what's happening here in the viewer. So we see there's 2 different sides to this. The left side shows me the value that this LFO is giving me. The right side is the name of the channel that the value is being sent through. And if I were to unplay that, I can see I have a visual. It's like a highlighted portion of this viewer. It's moving from left to right. So a nice thing that I like to do if I'm like not quite sure what these values are doing is I like to use another operator called the trail chop. So I'm going to search for the trail chop. And the trail chop displays a history of its input channels back in time. So I'm just going to add that just off to the side here. I'm going to delete this after. And if I connect this to the first input of that trail, I got a nice little graph here. And I like this a little bit better. It's a little bit more visual, and it also shows me like the history, or like as time goes by, I can see like the entire duration of what this LFO is doing. To the left side here, these are the values. So we can see that this is, as the name implies, it is oscillating between two values, a -1 and +1. And this is very reminiscent of a sine wave. And you can see here, this Chan1, this is moving in real time, so I can kind of see how that value is changing as well over time. Down at the bottom, this is the number of samples that is included in this. And yeah, so this gives me a pretty clear indication of how these values are changing. I'm going to leave that here just for the sake of being able to just kind of have that visualization. And I'm going to open up the parameters for LFO, because I feel like this is one we should definitely dive into, because there's a lot of different variation when it comes to this. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the first one, which is type. So by default, we have a sine, a type of sine, and this is a sine wave. If I click on this drop-down menu, there are a few other options here, and I do want to go through these one by one because I've used all of them before. So Gaussian, if I click on that, I can see this changes the behavior of the wave. So if I look at the graph, so instead of -1 to +1, my range has changed from 0 to +1. So Gaussian makes that so it is completely, it's a positive, whereas sine, it was going from negative to positive. Cool, so Gaussian, pretty cool. I got that understood. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about triangle. We can see triangle, very similar to sine in that it goes from -1 to +1. In this case, it is more so a linear curve, right? So it's more like straight, more rigid, and there are sharp, sharp tips here. Let's go to the next one here, which is ramp. So ramp goes from 0 to 1. And you can see it increases, and then it immediately, once it hits 1, it drops down to 0. So there is no decrease in value for the ramp. And I think the ramp is something we're going to be using right now. But two more, we have the square, which as a square wave, you can see that it is going from -1 to +1. And we could think of this as an on and an off, right? So there's a moment of time when the value is 1, and then a moment in time when it's 0. There's no in between here. The last one is pulse. And pulse gives us a momentary value of 1. So almost like a click or a snap. It's like 1, 1, 1. There's no in between values. It's pretty immediate in jumping up and then coming back down. Cool. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to stick with the ramp, because what I want to do is I want to use this to animate the outline of my shape, of my visual here. So I know that ramp, it goes from 0 to 1. I can also use the frequency parameter to change how quickly or how slowly this is changing over time. So if I decrease the frequency, that's going to slow down the rate. If I increase it, it's going to increase that rate. It's going to make it much faster. So I found a sweet spot for this. Again, you're welcome to change this to your liking. But I'm going to set that to be 0.2. I found that to be a pretty nice one as it's traveling along, as the gradient's moving and animated along the outline there. There's also amplitude that changes the peaks of the wave, but I'm not going to touch that. Usually I like to use other methods instead of changing the LFO directly, which we'll talk about once we get into audio. Cool, and that's pretty much it. So from here, I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to add a null chop. So what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and create another separate node, another separate branch from here, right? I don't want to just connect. I don't want to kind of use this chain here. So let's go ahead and let's just see what happens if we try to right click and then add our null. Okay, so if we right click and add our null chop, we see that it actually gets thrown in the middle of this chain here, which is what I do not want. I actually want just to kind of make a separate branch. So I'm going to Control Z or Command Z, and instead, I have a mouse, so this is going to be easy for me. I'm going to middle mouse click instead, and I'm going to add that null. And when I middle mouse click, I'm saying, okay, create a separate branch here so that it is, yeah, it's separate. It's not creating the chain with a trail. And then, yeah, it's good practice to have nulls at the end of these chop chains, just because if there's other things that we want to do and add, we can add those here. And we're going to see why this is important in a second. So the last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and map or send these values, send this channel over to my ramp, because this is the ramp we have. We want that to affect our outline. So I'm going to click on my ramp 2, and this is going to be a pretty important step to make sure we're being mindful of, especially if we're doing this for the first time, is how we're going to send this value into my ramp. So because all we're dealing with in chops, in this case, they're just numbers, we see that the parameter values, they are also numbers, right? So we can kind of see how these two are already connecting. So really all I need to do is map this or send this value into whatever parameter that I want to be affected. So for my ramp, what I want to change here is the, which parameter we're going to change? I'm going to change the phase. So first thing you want to do is open up the parameters for that ramp so you can see them here. And we're going to look at some other flags here on my null operator. And if you look at the bottom right corner, you see there's 3 buttons, and there's one that looks like a little plus symbol. This is called the viewer active flag. And if I were to click on this, you can see now that the viewer becomes interactable. When I hover my mouse over it, it becomes highlighted, and I can actually see my cursor changes as well. So with this turned on, I can go ahead and click and drag, and you see my cursor becomes an arrow, and I can drop that onto the phase parameter. And I can select, I'm going to select chop reference here, and that's going to reference the value that's being generated here in my null. And now you can see my ramp is now animating. And what the phase does is essentially it's rotating that gradient counterclockwise. And this is actually pretty nice because by default, the LFO is going from 0 to 1. So that actually fit nicely in with an ideal range for the phase. If there are any other, well, we'll see how we can modify that range later on. But there are ways that we can modify the range just in case the value just doesn't actually match up and like perfectly match up the way it did here. Okay, so this is what we have so far now. So we have this animating outline. And if I look here, it's been also affecting this multiply, which is then just trickling on down the network to the final state here. Cool, so that's how we can animate. Pretty simple, easy way using LFO. Our last thing that we'll talk about is the audio, how we can get audio to start to drive and affect changes in our network. Cool. Awesome. So let's go ahead and do it. Again, if any questions, I know chops, especially if this is like, it's definitely a change from tops. But I think, you know, once you get the hang of it, you'll also notice how all these operators are connected, right? They all work with work with each other in order to create more complex things. And yeah, we're definitely making progress here. Cool. All right, so let's do the last set here, which is audio. So I'm going to use audio to do a few things. I want it to change the rotation of this shape. I also want it to change the color. And I want this to be according to, I want it to be driven by the audio. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So audio, the way that we can add audio is, once again, we're going to be using the chop family, because audio, if you break it down, it's just signals, right? It's just waveforms that creates things that we can hear. So I'm going to go ahead and search for the audio file in chop. I know it's a pretty long name, audio file in, but this is going to read an audio from our computer, read an audio file from our computer. And I don't hear anything yet. So audio file, and you can see there's a lot more like craziness going on here compared to the trail chop that we have over here, right? We have two channels, so there's a top and a bottom one, and this is really just like the left and the right speaker, or left and right ear. We can think of it that way. So we're not really going to be looking at this in particular and analyzing this, but we're going to be using some tools ready at our disposal to do some work for us. But first, I want to be able to hear the audio. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on the output, and I'm going to add an audio device out. Audio device out. Cool. And let me go ahead and turn the audio on for you all. Make sure it's not too loud. Cool. And when you add audio for the first time in TouchDesigner, it actually defaults to this standard audio track. So if you've worked with this before, this is something that we all know and love. It is the default TouchDesigner audio music rave kind of track. So for audio device out, if I look at the parameters, I can decide which device to send the audio out of, and device is just what speaker I want to listen to it. This is set to default, so for me it's coming out of this ear. And you can also change it, so if you have like headphones, if you have like table, like desktop speakers, you can click on this drop down menu. You'll be able to see all of the available devices there. I can also change the volume right here in TouchDesigner. So by the 1 is the max, I can make this lower. It's a little more pleasant to listen to. I can also change the pan, so I can change it whether it's going from the right ear or the left ear, or like, you know, we can also make some animation to transition the audio to. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of like leave this at 0 for now, because I don't want to listen to that as we're working the entire time. Cool. Okay, so we have the audio file. Now we got to do a little bit of work to be able to analyze specific aspects of the audio. And in this case, all I want to focus on is the bass drum and then the snare drum, or the kick drum and then the snare drum. Because those are, the, especially in a track like this, those are the easiest ones that we can go ahead and get data from and also have a lot of precision with. So we're going to talk about this neat little tool provided by TouchDesigner, which is the palette. If I go to the top left corner, there is a symbol, and I never really know how to describe the symbol. It's almost like a little wave with an arrow coming out of it, you know, like a little platform with an arrow pointing up. It's toward the top left, and if I hover over it, it says open palette, so I'm going to go ahead and open my palette back up. And the palette is a tool set. They are pre-built tools by Derivative and also other contributors that come when you download. And we can use this to do a lot of really cool things that are really quick and already made for us. And you're welcome to kind of click through and explore these tools. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Tools section here. This is the top half. We're looking at the top half of this panel. I'm going to go to Tools, and then we'll see here there's a lot of different really cool effects that we can choose from here. The one in particular that I want to add is the audio analysis tool. And to add this, I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag that into my network. And we get this really cool node here. It has a nice little interface as well. And then once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and just close that palette out, just so, again, I have enough space here. Okay, so let's talk about this. First thing I want to do is I want to send the audio into this analyzer. So I'm going to click on the output for audio file. I'm going to go ahead and connect that to my audio analysis. And if we just get a little peek, we can actually double click to go inside of this. So this is, in a way, a container or a folder that holds in more operators. And there's a lot of things going on here, right? So you're welcome to explore this. There's some notes here kind of explaining how things are coming together. But we're going to go ahead and just kind of like leave this and trust that it's going to work and focus on how we can use it to our advantage. So notice how when I entered that folder, you might have noticed this path up here towards the top change. For me, it's going to say something a little bit different because I have another folder that I'm working inside of. But yours probably says Project 1 and then Audio Analysis. So what I'm going to do is there are a couple ways I can leave this folder. One way is I can just zoom out until it leaves. Another way is I can actually type the U key, so U for up, and that's going to get us up and out of that container. I can also click on the Project 1, and that'll just also bring us back up as well. So yeah, TouchDesigner does kind of work on a little file navigation system in a way. You can add containers or add folders, and you can work inside of them. It's also really good for organizing, especially if your networks get really, really big. I find it's really useful to be able to organize those in very specific ways. So let's go ahead and take a look at the interface here. And what I can actually do is interact with this interface. So to interact with it, if I click on it, you'll see once again there is this grayed out cross at the bottom corner. I can click that and I can activate the viewer so that I can interact with the viewer. So I'm going to turn off this low here, and that really just grabs all the low frequencies of the song. And again, what I want to focus on is grabbing the data that is related to the kick and the snare drum. So I'm going to turn on the kick and turn on the snare. Once I turn those on, you'll see there's some like visual cues here that tell me when it's actually being triggered and when it's actually detecting a kick. So here's when I can then turn my music back on, just so I can be able to hear and fine-tune when these are being set off. So the first thing is the kick drum. Kick is the bass. And I like this track a lot because it has a really just like consistent bass on the beats of the song. Do, 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 do. So you'll see the threshold is actually getting triggered a lot more than we want it to. It's actually kind of going a little bit crazy here. So what we can do is turn up this threshold dial. And actually, let's turn off the snare just so we can focus on the threshold here. Right, so we can hear, we're listening to the kick drum, and we can now see this has calmed down a bit, and it's actually matching more so with the track. So when we increase the threshold, we're setting a stronger restriction on when it gets triggered, right? So we're kind of saying, hey, really listen closely and only get set off when you hear that strong bass note. Cool. So let's do the same thing with the snare. I can turn this off for now just so I can focus on the signal for the snare. The snare is very similar. It really only plays on the 2 and the 4 of the beat. There may be some other signals here and there with like the hi-hat, but let's go ahead and increase the threshold as well. That looks pretty good, pretty close to me. And so we turn both of these on. Right now we get a little dance going on. Cool, and that's pretty much it. So now we can, let's go ahead and see this data as if we're looking at it through like a chop, right? So this first output, I'm gonna right click, and I'm gonna add a null. I'm gonna add a null just so I can see what exactly this audio analyzer is putting out for me. And you can see I have a lot more channels here, and luckily they're named pretty clearly for me. But I can see there's a kick channel and then a snare channel. And these correlate with what we were just editing over here, right? These are turned on, so these are being signaled on. And that's perfect, right? These are the two channels that I need. I can also see that these are, there are only really two values that I can work with here, which is 0 and 1. Now it's not really gonna work for me because I want to map these to very specific parameters within my visuals. So we're gonna do a little bit of changing, a little bit of math to really make these work for us and make these map evenly to what we want to use them for in my visual. Great, so the first thing I wanna do is I want to go ahead and isolate these kick and this snare channel. So from the null, I'm gonna right click and I'm going to add a select chop. And selects and renames channels from other chops. So let's add a select, and if I open up the parameters for select, I have a few parameters here. If I look at the channel names, this is set to an asterisk or a star, which means it's selecting all the channels that are being fed into it. If I click on this little triangle arrow towards the right, you'll see here's all the channels that are listed. So I can click to select, let's say the kick first. And now this isolates the kick. So now I'm only working with the kick channel. I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna actually just copy and paste this select, make it much easier. So Control C, Control V. And that's exactly what I wanted to do is I just wanted to make another branch. And I'm gonna go ahead and delete kick. And instead I'm going to choose, you guessed it, snare. So now I have these two channels, they're isolated, which means that I can perform unique operations on them. In this case, I want to go ahead and perform some math on these values because 1 and 0, they're very limiting. I can't do much with those two values. First thing I do want to edit here is one of these visuals. And I want to change the color first. Right, so we talked about hue offset or the HSV adjust top, and we know that if we manipulate this hue offset slider, I can change that color. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to map this bass drum to this hue offset. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of play around and find a value that I like. Because I do want it to start at 0, because I want it to be here by default. But then I want it to also change to a second value. And I find that if I go into the negative, I get a bigger distinction. And so I'm just gonna kind of drag this slider and see how much variation I want. So I'm starting here in this like blue, and I want the background to be pretty different in the starting point. So let's make it maybe -120. Okay, so we have a set value that we want. And what I like to do is kind of take a little note about, okay, like I want this to go to -120. So a nice way that we can leave notes to ourselves in TouchDesigner is by leaving comments. So if I right click, I can search for the add comments option. This is the second one. I'm going to go ahead and select comment. Now I get a little box that I can type in. And this is ignored by TouchDesigner, it's not treated as an operator. So I don't need to put any kind of input or send any data out. But instead I'm going to say, okay, HSV range. The starting one is going to be 0, and then the second value I want to be -120. Just so I have that note to myself. I can also resize this I can move it just so I don't forget. Okay, so I have my value. I want it to go to -120. Perfect. So now the next goal here is to get this kick value. And instead of making it go from 0 to 1, I want to make it go from 0 to -120. And as you can see, I don't really have the option in parameters to change values. I can't really do much here in the audio analyzer. So instead, I'm going to use another operator. So from this first select, which has the kick channel, I'm going to right click. I'm going to add a math chop. And with the math, we can perform arithmetic operations on channels. Channels of a chop can be combined into one channel. Several chops can be combined into one chop. Okay, I just want to do math. So let's go ahead and click on that. Let's add this to the mix here. And really quick way to do this, since I still want my starting value to be 0, I'm just going to go ahead and in my math parameters, I'm going to go to the multi-add tab. And I have this parameter called multiply, and this is where I can choose the multiplication factor for my value. So it's going from 0 to 1. I want it to go from 0 to -120. So all I really need to put here is -120. Right? Because 1 times anything is that number, is the anything. So if I multiply 0 by -120, it's going to be 0. If I multiply 1 by -120, it's going to be -120. And then everything in between that is going to just kind of be that within that range of 0 to -120. Perfect. So with that, let's go ahead and right click. Let's add our null, because for now, we're done with this chain here. And now we got to do the last step, which is map this or send this over to my HSV adjust. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to open up those parameters for the HSV adjust. And hopefully we remember this step. So in this null, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the viewer to be active. And from here, I can click and drag the value to my hue offset as a chop reference. Cool. So I'm listening to the audio. And yeah, it's pretty close. It's pretty cool. Yeah, right? So that's pretty much going with the beat there. Do, which is exactly what I want. Now, it's pretty sudden, right? It just kind of jumps from one color to the other, which is, it may work if you're going for that effect. But I want it to actually take some time to actually transition from one color to the other. So I'm actually going to pull this null out a little bit, and I'm going to insert an operator here. So to insert operators into already connected nodes, I can right click on that wire and I can insert operator. And from here, I can search. I'm going to use let's use, let's use filter. All right, so filter is going to slow down that rate of change. So it's actually going to make it a lot more gradual and a lot more smooth. So for this filter, I'm going to go ahead and open up the parameters. And right now it's actually way super slow. So it's really, now it doesn't even look like it's being reactive to the audio. So for the filter width, I'm actually going to turn this down to 0.3. And we can see the unit here is in seconds. So this is taking 0.3 seconds. It's applying a 0.3 second filter within this change. So we don't want it to be 1 whole second, because then there's going to be no real effect. But if we put that to a pretty low value, now I'm getting a really nice transition from one to the other. Now, if you do increase this, it'll kind of take more time and it won't be as aligned with the music. But yeah, now that is how we can map that kick drum to the hue offset. All right, going into the last step here, the snare. So in our example, we had the snare changing the rotation of the shape over time. So pretty much we're gonna do the same kind of thing we just did up above. So I'm gonna be using math to change the values of my snare drum, the values of the snare. And this is why we have the transforms. Awesome, no problem, Pixelator. Yeah, filter is really useful. And I definitely use it a lot as well. So we look up here towards the top, right? This is kind of where we had our initial shapes drawn. We added these transforms here. And the transform is going to make it really useful to change the behavior or change the orientation of these shapes. So for both of these transforms, we have this rotate value. And I can play around with the slider. I can see that rotation is changing as I move it. And the reason why I'm doing it here on transform, because if I look at circle, I can see there's also a rotate parameter in the circle as well. The reason why I'm doing it in transform is because with circles, right, these generate data. So in a way, you're actually doing more work, because if you were to rotate this thing that is constantly being generated, it's constantly creating a new shape, which on this smaller scale might not make a huge difference, but if you're looking at more larger projects, then it will definitely add up. So I'm not going to be changing the rotation on the actual circle, but instead I'm going to use the transform, because the transform, it just edits the data. It doesn't create it, it doesn't generate it. So for transform, I'm going to use the rotation parameter here. And it could be whatever values that you want it to here. So I'm going to just kind of play around, and I'm going to see what values that I want. I do want it to be from 0 again. Actually, let's make it from like a negative number. So let's make it negative 90 to maybe positive 90. We'll see what that looks like. So negative 90 to positive 90. Let's go ahead and head on back down to our audio analyzer here, and let's right click and let's add another math. And for this math, I'm now going to be looking at a different tab, because now I want to actually change the value. I don't want it to be from 0 to another number. I want it to be from negative 90 to positive 90. So it's going to be changing the way that I actually do this calculation. So for math, I'm going to go over here to the range tab. And the range tab has two parameters. It has a from range, and then it has a to range. So the way that we can think of a range tab is a mapping function. So what this takes is an original range, and then it converts it to a new range. Another way to think about this is, okay, this is an on-the-spot example, but let's say, okay, I have this mug here, right? And this mug has a certain height. Let's say this height is from 0 to 1, right? Just same as our snare drum. Let's say I want to transfer the data or the liquid inside of this into this mason jar. And this is a different height, right? For example, let's just like say it's like going from -5 to +5. I know it's like not pretty realistic, but yeah, let's say that. Okay, so I have these two different containers. One has a certain range for the liquid, another has a different range for the liquid. So what this range does is the from range is the original container, the original heights. The to range is the new height. Okay, so in a way, what I'm doing here with this range is I'm transferring the liquid to from one container to another container while maintaining the amount of liquid that's in there. Okay, all right, let's roll with that. So the from range, we're looking at the original range of this snare channel, which we don't have to change because it's from 0 to 1. So that's fine by default. What we do need to change is the new container, the new range we want to map this to, which is what I said out loud, -90 to +90. Okay. So now we can see whenever it's 0, it's resting at -90. And when it changes to 1, which is very momentary, it jumps to +90. Okay. And again, if you want to be able to visualize this, we can use the trail to connect that. In a way, it almost looks like a pulse, the pulse type of wave. Okay, so see it's rested at -90, jumping up to +90. Perfect. So with that, let's go ahead and add a null. And I'm going to make some room because we are going to add one more thing there. But let's go ahead and map this to the transform. Let's focus on transform 1 for now. And I got to do a lot of kind of navigating, clicking around. And let's go ahead and drop this onto rotate at the chop reference. Okay. So it's changing, but we had the same issue we had earlier. And that was, it's very momentary, it's very sudden, and there really is no like transitionary period. So I'm going to use a different operator here. So we use filter will work for this as well, but I want to show you another alternative, which is lag. So I'm going to right click on this wire, insert operator. I'm going to add a lag chop. So this adds lag. And what's nice about the lag is that if you look at the parameters, the lag parameter in particular, there are 2 values. And this is we could think of this as acceleration and deceleration. So the amount of time it takes to jump to the new value and the amount of time it takes to come back from that value. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and customize this. I want to make the initial one 0.4, and I do want it to take a little more time to come back and settle, so I'm going to make this 0.8. So you can see here, when the snare hits, that initial like change is pretty quick, but it does take more time to come back and settle in. And that is a direct result of these values. So if I were to make this first value 0.8, then it's pretty even. That initial jump will match the rate of the second jump. And this is really up to you, however you want to, whatever kind of effect that you want to have here. Yeah. And that is, that's it. That is pretty much it. What the power of like chops is that, again, they're just values. So if I want to send this to other parameters here, all I need to do is just rinse and repeat this process. So I just I'd have to add another math here, another little chain down below, and just think about, okay, what other range do I want to do here? Like what other range do I want to change? Like for example, let's do a quick one here. Let's see how this one looks. So let's say we want to like engage this switch somehow. This is probably the most effective if the blend is on. So let's say I want the snare to also like be able to go back and forth between my triangle and my pentagon, right? Maybe I kind of want that action to be going on there. So let's figure that out, right? So the index, we know this is the set range. It can only be from 0 to 1 because we only have 2 inputs. So I'm working with 0 to 1, so that actually is pretty convenient because I probably don't even need a math. So if I go down here, and it doesn't matter which, you can do kick, you can do snare. I'm just going to do snare. And I'm going to go ahead and just make another branch from that select. So I'm going to middle mouse click and let's just add a null, just so we have that break here. And then let's see what it looks like just like this. Okay, let's see what happens if it's just like a sudden change, if I like that or not. Okay, again, snare is going from 0 to 1. Okay, not very clear. Can't really tell that it's actually changing. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to expand this. I'm going to go ahead and insert another filter. And let's go ahead and let's change the switch. Okay, the blend inputs is on. I think the filter is way too big, so I'm going to just go ahead and decrease the filter width again. Yeah, so this isn't really effective. Maybe something else I could do is instead of filter, I can use lag. So I can control the amount of time it takes for it to go back to being the pentagon. And yeah, so this is like the process of experimentation, right? We have these sets operators that we already know about from here. And I can definitely think of ways to use these to my advantage. So lag, I can change they're pretty quick. Let's make the second value larger. And I can start to kind of see that triangle is it's appearing for a little bit longer. Let's decrease the initial one. And I can also, if I want to kind of do this incrementally instead of like just punching in numbers, I can actually click and hold my mouse down in that parameter field. And I get this little table that I can choose how I want to change this by increments. So if I hover I'm holding down my mouse down. If I hover down to 0.01 and start to drag it to the left or to the right, I can change that value incrementally. And so that's pretty cool. So now I'm at 0.01 and that's actually doing a lot better. I can also choose another more like precise one, which is 0.001, and that's changing the value by 0.001. So I can make this even smaller. And that is looking real nice. Yeah, so my final values for that lag, 0.003 and 0.8. So it's pretty quick in changing the triangle and taking more time to breathe and transfer back to the pentagon. And cool, so that is it. That is the AudioReactive workshop. Something I did not mention throughout this is make sure that you save often and save frequently. I did not save at all since we've worked. So that's pretty dangerous, playing with fire there, because if your computer crashes for some reason, you know, it's gonna be hard to recover that. Awesome. So before we head out, I do want to kind of mention one last thing here, and I will be hosting an online asynchronous mini course sometime in March. I don't know yet when, but I can just drop the link if it's not already in the description. I can drop the link here into the chat. It is also in the description, I just checked. So I'm gonna go ahead and just mute that audio too for y'all. Because yeah, especially if you work with audio a lot, you know, these things get stuck in your head and you're like, I'm kind of over it. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna drop the link in the chat for you all. I'm also going to share my browser window there too. Okay, so yeah, I'll be hosting a mini course sometime in March, and this is going to be 4 weeks long. So we're going to be covering, again, it's intended for beginners, but with this, we're going to be diving a lot deeper into what is possible with these operators. So 4 weeks in length. Let me get back here. And yeah, so the idea is that it's going to be asynchronous, which means that there's going to be pre-recorded videos as opposed to like live in person, or not in person, but like live synchronous like tutorials. Just because I find, especially like everyone's busy, it's really hard to find a common time among everyone. Having these be pre-recorded just makes it a lot more efficient, so that you can work through them on your own time. So it'll be 4 weeks long. There'll be pre-recorded video lessons so that you can work on your own at your own pace. I'll also be offering assignments. So we'll have weekly assignments, smaller assignments leading up to a more of a larger project at the end. And these are going to be designed to help you practice the things, topics, and the concepts that we'll be covering in the in the videos. And the last thing here is active community support. So we'll be running a Discord as well, so that will kind of like you'll be with like a cohort. So everyone who signs up will be part of the same track. So there'll be 1 week, once per week, we'll have like the video lessons released. You'll finish your assignments and then you'll share them within our Discord community. And this is really helpful and useful, especially with like, so you don't feel like you're working through it on your own. There's that support there. You can share what you've done, share your progress. Um, and yeah, also really helps with like, if you need like some deadlines, a little bit of accountability, so that you actually like, finish and work through everything. This is also really helpful in supporting that as well. So on this website at the very bottom, you can subscribe for early registration. This comes with also early bird pricing. Again, I'm still working on the finer details of this. But once the official course is released and registration is open, if you subscribe, you will get that initial notification with that early bird pricing before it reverts back to what the original pricing is going to be. I promise no spam. I won't spam you with daily emails or whatever. All right, this will only be relevant to like what's happening, what's going on here. So yeah, that is pretty much all I have for you all. So yeah, thank you all for sticking around. Again, this is going to be made available after we're done here, so you can always come back, check the different sections out, check these things out again, follow along, and yeah, you are welcome to post any other questions that you have in the chat or in the comments. And yeah, it has been really great. Thank you all for coming through. And I realized that my video is not here. So yeah, thank you all so much.